why he selected the categories to support, which he included in the endowment. A great deal of that had to do with his feeling that he should give back to the two Carolinas because he made his money there through power, and he wanted to help, I would say, his neighbors, his friends, the people who had supported him, the people of the two states. And he said he wished he could have done more, but if he had and had weakened it, he wouldn't have helped those two, that geographical area so much. The categories, I think, stemmed from a lot from his background. Many people forget that these were dirt farmers. I mean, dirt scratching farmers, poor people. And he watched his father, Washington Duke, push up from his Civil War stint. And I think, you see, they lost their mother very early, and the women of the family, aunts and people like that from Burlington, came in and helped them. And I think he thought a lot about, I would say, caring for each other. I think a lot of that stemmed from his family, and the way they lived, and the way they protected each other, and the way they were, half orphans there. And I'm sure that all stimulated his feeling for orphans and half orphans and what they faced, and I'm sure that a lot of that had to do with that. His interest in health and hospitals, I'm sure, came from his watching the people in the country who really didn't have very much health care, and he wanted to raise that. And of course, education, he didn't have very much education himself, business school, but nothing deeper. And of course, the church that is included in the endowment, that is also definitely stemming from their total belief in the Christian ethic, Christianity, and also Methodism. Because his uncle, for example, was a circuit rider of the Methodist Church. He had this day after day. They spoke about this in the family, and a lot of his inspiration came from his church life, and that carried through all of his existence, really. So I would say that much of what he did stemmed from a very deeply thoughtful, close family and what he observed as he grew up. There's this story about, and it's true, that my grandfather, Uncle Buck's brother, kept a sort of a journal when they were all here in North Carolina. And then Mr. J.B. Duke moved to New York and so on. But Benjamin kept this journal from the early days of what they had given. And it started way, way back in the farm days. And he would say, so much for burying the dead, so much for the church, so much for helping so-and-so. And he kept it this way, but you look at it and it's a decision in a way that the family moved in that direction of care of in the church, care of the health of people, and these categories started out very early. So it was sort of a family decision coming down from his father. And I think Washington Duke, he was an extremely, as well as I can understand it, was extremely outgoing. And you know, there's the story that J.B. Duke's father, Washington, lived very close to the tobacco company. And people would walk by and see his flowers. And he'd say, yes, they really are nice. I'm glad you like them. You can have them anytime. You know, you can, just, they're yours as much as they are mine. And I think that seems to be what his personality was like, though very, very definite about the things he wanted to do. So it was a family custom. A lot of Mr. J.B. Duke's life stemmed from his early days. I really think they were planted in his mind. And the church was very, very powerful. Uncle Buck's philanthropy to women, toward women, and his inclusion of them, I'm sure, stems from his upbringing. Because you see, his sister was very important to the Duke family there in the country. Their sister Mary sort of helped them out when their mother died, and the people who came in and looked after them and helped Mr. Washington Duke with his family were women. And I think they grew up feeling this way. In fact, the family has always been extremely interested in women's development. My grandmother, who was the sister-in-law of Uncle Buck, was a very strong woman. She was Sarah P. Duke, for whom the gardens are named. Very strong woman, and there were strong women all the way through. So none of that's too surprising to me. And the fact that he backed women's college, he did say that he would not back the support of Trinity College unless they gave equal educational opportunities to women. And I think they asked him to be a member of the Women's Suffrage Committee, which he turned down, because he wasn't that sort of, he wasn't interested in notoriety of any kind. I think he just didn't want that kind of thing. But he was very interested in women and their education and their development and their futures. I remember the first time, and the only time, that I ever saw Uncle Buck, and I'm sad that I didn't know him, and I have no idea, I was probably 2 or 3 years old. Anyway, I have an impression that I crawled up in his lap. He was sitting in his office, close to the ticker tape, as I remember, machine, and I smelled his cigar and knew he was a very warm person, and that's all I remember, I'm sad to say. Uncle Buck's choices of friends and people he worked with was really pretty remarkable. Most of them were Southerners, people who had been successful in business. He chose some younger people who he felt would go on to good things. They were all rather conservative, but they encouraged him in what he wanted to do. Strangely enough, he seemed to know the kinds of people who would support him in his desire to progress in the categories he's set up in the endowment. And business-wise, of course, they were all good businessmen. And Mr. Allen, for instance, after Mr. Perkins died, Mr. Allen then became, after Mr. Duke, he became head of the endowment. He picked really kind of remarkable people, people who, incidentally, and I think he must have known this, were thoughtful about people around them. They were all very thoughtful people. They cared. I think as you go down the list of the people, for instance, on the endowment, most of them were his business associates, but they all had a certain kind of kindness, a sort of fellowship with him in looking after people. How has Mr. Duke's vision stood the test of time? That, to me, is one of the remarkable things. I'm sure that he and Mr. Perkins, who helped him write the endowment, must have talked a lot about this. And Mr. Perkins, whom I knew very well, was a very quiet, thoughtful person. And I'm sure he interpreted what Mr. Duke wanted in that beautiful language of the endowment. It's kind of remarkable. Everything that they have in that endowment stands today. I think what he wanted to do was to be broad enough with the categories so that they would always have some need. I can't imagine a world, no matter how different it will be in 100 years from now, not needing health care. The churches will need help. There'll always be children who need help. And education is forever. So that I think that's the reason that it stood the test of time. To me, the single greatest accomplishment of Mr. Duke and the endowment, his endowment, it has to be Duke University. Because in that small number of years, for a university to start as a small college and build to a prime university is almost unheard of. And there's a lot that can be said about that, because Trinity College was exceptional in itself. So he caught the spirit of that college that had remarkable leadership from the very beginning and remarkable faculty from the very beginning. So he picked something that really could grow extremely well. But there again, that was his genius. And he also picked it because it was home. But that's the heart part of it. So it was a very lucky melding of the academic and the sentimental, and it turned out well. Were Uncle Buck to come back today and talk to us, I know he would exclaim in wonderment and joy and deep gratitude about how his philanthropy and his whole concept of what the endowment would be, how it's been handled and how it's grown. I wonder sometimes if I know he wanted it to grow like this. That was his aim, his goal, mission. But I wonder if he ever dreamed it would be this successful.